All right, welcome back, everybody, to the next episode of the Thinklete podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Dr. Greene, whose work has fundamentally changed how parents, educators, and coaches understand kids who struggle with behavior, regulation, and impulse control. Dr. Green's the author of The Explosive Child and The Lost at School, and the creator of the documentary The Kids We Lose, as well as the developer of the collaborative and proactive solutions model, but built around the idea that kids do well if they can. As a parent, former athlete, and coach, this conversation hits close to home. Today, we're talking about discipline, environments, perseverance, and how schools and sports can either escalate struggles or help kids build real skills and confidence. Dr. Greene, I'm really grateful that you're here.
Glad to be here.
So, can you kick this off with giving our listeners an idea of the philosophy that sits underneath everything that you do?
The philosophy that is underneath everything I do is kids do well if they can. The belief that if a kid could do well, they would do well. If they're not doing well, something's getting in their way. What's getting in their way isn't what we adults often default to as what we think is getting in their way. Generally speaking, it's not poor motivation, it's not laziness, it's not attention-seeking, manipulative, coercive, unmotivated, limit testing. It's not a lot of those things. Often it's skills, and that's not necessarily the first thing us adults think of.
Sure. So I had a chance yesterday actually to view the documentary The Kids We Lose, and it's easy to see how environments shape behavior, but what about families where that connection isn't so obvious and parents of defiant children or children that struggle with impulse control are often left confused or blamed?
We do blame parents a lot. That's because the traditional belief, this is how I was trained a long time ago, but not what I believe anymore. The traditional belief is that parents of kids with concerning behaviors are passive, permissive, inconsistent, non-contingent, inept disciplinarians. You can see how easily that rolls off my tongue still. I changed my thinking about that when I noticed that almost every parent I was working with who had a kid with concerning behaviors had well-behaved kids in their home. So I started looking a whole lot closer at what might be going on with this particular kid and trying to understand why this particular kid might not respond as well as well-behaved kids seem to traditional discipline. And what's been exploding in the last 40 to 50 years is the research telling us that kids' concerning behavior is mostly due to struggles with certain skills. And it's any variety of skills, but the ones I tend to focus on are flexibility and adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, emotion regulation. You can take that to the bank on what's causing concerning behaviors, but that means that a lot of what we've been thinking hasn't been accurate, and there's a good chance that what we've been trying to do to quote unquote help these kids hadn't been working.
For sure. And so why is solving problems proactively so much more effective than having a reactive approach during a behavioral breakdown or then after?
Well, heat of the moment isn't good for much of anything. It's certainly not good for solving problems. But a lot of people have been taught that they shouldn't even focus on the problems that are causing a kid's concerning behavior. They don't even know that it's problems that are causing a kid's concerning behavior. They've been focused exclusively on the kid's behavior. And what a lot of us were taught is that the more proximal the consequence is to the behavior, the stronger the link is between the concerning behavior and the consequences of that behavior. I'm not even focused on the kid's concerning behavior. That's the kid's frustration response. That's their distress response. I'm focused on what's causing their concerning behavior. And almost always it is an expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting. Now here's the proactive part. It's not the first time this kid's had difficulty meeting this expectation, 99% of the time. It's the 50th time, which means that that problem is predictable, which means that we can identify it proactively, which means that we can solve it proactively and get rid of all that stuff we're doing in the heat of the moment.
Sure, sure, absolutely. And for the neurodivergent community, when we talk about discipline and we talk about expectations, should kids that are neurodivergent be held to the same expectations by a teacher or by a coach when it comes to their behavior? And then when the coach or the teacher or the authority figure, for lack of a better word, needs to then discipline that student or athlete, should there be different expectations, or should all should they be disciplined the same? What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, we don't want to treat any population, whether neurodivergent or neurotypical, as if they are a monolith. Um, every neurodivergent kid I've worked with was different.
Mm-hmm.
Every neurotypical kid I've worked with was different. So we want to take each kid as they come. They're their own reference point. The goal is to meet them where they're at. Generally speaking, though, when people are talking about discipline, they're talking about punishment, sometimes reward. And here's something that's very important for people to know: there is no reward, there is no punishment that will solve any of the problems that are causing the behaviors that we've been so busy rewarding and punishing. We can probably skip the whole reward and punishment part and go straight to solving problems, and both we and the kids would be a whole lot better off for it.
So, environment. When we talk about the environment that these kids are in or are coming from, how much of an impact does that have then on the why that these behaviors are then being shown?
Well, I generally speaking, well, my motto is everything's 100% nature and 100% nurture. So it's hard to put a percentage on how much the environment is coming into play versus how much genetics are coming into play.
Mm-hmm.
Especially genetics and environment overlap quite a bit because the people who are often raising the kid are also the same gene pool. So I don't try to sort that out. If you're asking, are there kids going home to environments that are not especially ideal? The answer is yes. Are there a lot of kids who are doing very well who are going home to environments that are not exactly ideal? Yes. When do I find we are most likely to look at the kid's environment? When the kid is not doing well. But we often lose sight of the fact that many kids coming out of similarly difficult environments are doing very well.
Mm-hmm.
So, no question, there are kids who are going home to circumstances that are not ideal. We should do everything about that we can. But if we don't have the ability to have great impact on that environment, then we are on the hook for making sure that the environment in which we do have the kid, school, sports team, you name it, is a place where this kid feels supported and can thrive. Because
Sure.
Some good is better than no good. And we're not going to be doing this kid no good if all we're doing is pointing toward home, about which we may not be able to do much.
Yeah. So I, just from a personal perspective, one of the, I think, struggles that we have as parents for our neurodivergent son is that, just to be very honest, my wife and I, we've never been formally diagnosed with ADHD or anything, right? We have grown up in a very traditional household. We went to good schools, had good programs, were obviously involved in athletics. And so one of the challenges for us has been the inability to, at times, understand and then relate to our son when he's having certain, tough times.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's obviously a lot of emotions and external judgment and things that come along with that. But, what would your advice be for parents, I guess, that are in that type of scenario where, hey, our kids' brains just work differently than ours, and we're doing everything we can to create a conducive or an environment that is conducive to their brain and their skill sets and their personality. but we're still struggling. What would your thoughts be there?
Number one, you're never going to get it perfect, hard though you might try. Number two, your kid's concerning behavior, when your kid is struggling, they're communicating something. We've all heard the cliche, all behavior is communication. Concerning behavior communicates that there's an expectation your child is having difficulty meeting. Almost always, right? Your best bet is to make a list of the expectations your child is having difficulty routinely meeting, right? Reliably meeting. Those are your unsolved problems. The reason your kid is still exhibiting concerning behavior over those unsolved problems is because they're still unsolved. Here's what's interesting. This is not, this is going to sound a little harsh, but it's not intended to be. It tells you that as hard as you've tried so far, whatever you've done on that unmet expectation hasn't worked. You're trying really hard, but you may be leaving somebody very important out of the mix. As you know, I've developed this 3-step problem-solving process. And the star of the show of the problem-solving process is the kid. In the first step, we're gathering information from the kid about what's making it hard for them to meet a particular expectation. Takes all the guesswork out. Us adults with the best of intentions often conduct ourselves in ways that suggest that we're supposed to divine what's getting in the kid's way. We're supposed to divine what the solution should be. You can leave the divining out too. The fact that your child is neurodivergent doesn't tell me anything. Neurodivergent is as heterogeneous as it gets, right? So we need to know your child beyond that, right? And a good way to get to know your kid is through the skills your kid is struggling with and the expectations your kid is having difficulty meeting. But you really get to know your kid when you start solving those problems with them. And you hear from them what's getting in their way. That is such an amazing way to get to know a kid, because now I often tell people in that first step, be prepared for surprises when you discover that what you thought you were going to hear is not what you ended up hearing. What a great way to get to know a kid.
Absolutely. I think in our situation, our son struggles with impulse control, and then that fine line between, is he strong-willed or is he defiant? And that is something where, when you get into the scenarios where there's that defiance being shown, it becomes more emotional, more combative, more back and forth. And from a parent's perspective, it's really difficult to say, hey, why is my son or daughter not able to follow direction that I am giving, right? And understanding all of that. I mean, you've probably had so many conversations and based so much of your work around this. I would be so curious. I'm sure people would be curious to just get your general thoughts on that emotion that we feel as parents when we have a kid that is defiant, or are they just very strong-willed? And hey, there's a lot of positive behind that as well.
Yeah, I don't know if many people would see a great deal of positive in a kid who's defiant.
Not that part, the strong-willedness for sure.
Strong-willed can be an asset. Doesn't always go over so well during childhood. It tends to go a lot better in adulthood.
Sure.
Circumstances, maybe. I don't know if you have to make that choice. When your child is being defiant, at the moments where you think your child is being strong-willed, I'm telling you, there's an expectation your kid is having difficulty meeting. This is why, and this is going to sound a little funny out of context, but we are in context. Non-compliance is good. Non-compliance tells you there's an expectation your child is having difficulty meeting. You want to know that, right? Non-compliance can also be informative. Defiance can be informative. If we take the time to figure out what expectation your child is having difficulty meeting, find out what's getting in their way, and solve it together. So I don't know if you have to make a choice between defiant and what was the other one you said?
Strong-willed. Strong-willed.
Strong-willed. You have a kid who's apparently struggling. You need more information about that. Your number one source of information about that is going to be your kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you may discover that neither defiant nor strong-willed is actually what's going on.
So when you are in a, let's call it a situation where there is, some sort of, explosion or blow up, how would you? Okay, so when you have a blow up and your son or daughter is showing defiance, and then there's the moment of, hey, I'm going to discipline them, but then it's met with shutdown and the communication stops from them towards us. What would be some approaches that we could take to sort of be able to have some sort of conversation with our children to then better understand where they're not meeting or why they're not meeting the expectation that was put in front of them?
First and foremost, we have got to get you out of the heat of the moment. Nothing good is going to happen once everybody's already upset. But what they're already upset over is an unsolved problem, an expectation your child is having difficulty meeting, and I'm going to guarantee it's not the first time. It might be the 50th or 100th time. Begging the question, so why are we stuck in the heat of the moment on this again? We knew it was coming, right? So number one, let's get out of the heat of the moment. It's this thing that we are in a tussle about is predictable. Let's solve it proactively.
Sure.
Secondly, if somebody wants me to talk to them and I'm already heated up and now they're disciplining me, party over. I ain't talking. The timing is off. The strategy is off. So you were asking, what should it sound like instead, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And by the way, what you are disciplining is your kid's frustration response. You're trying to, what psychologists of a certain type of training would call what you're doing in disciplining their frustration response is you're trying to extinguish their frustration response. You're trying to squash it. But if that frustration response is telling you something very important, your child is having difficulty meeting an expectation. You don't want to miss that. And it's highly predictable. Let's solve it proactively. No discipline needed, right? Believe it or not. I've noticed you've been having well, let's use a real example. Can you think of the last tussle?
Sure.
And what it was over?
Yeah, it seems like one of the core basis of ours are when there is not enough transition time given. So it's almost like we're giving direction or asking for a task to be done, but it's a spur of the moment thing versus, hey, can you have 5 minutes until we have to turn the TV off. And when there's not that that proactive warning or heads up, that seems to be met then with the pushback.
All right. So let's use the difficulty getting off the TV issue, right? If the signal for your kid getting off the TV is the sound of your voice, and there is no set established time for getting off the TV, then you're surprising your kid every time. As you've described your kid, I don't think surprises are going to be your best friend, right? But we also don't want the sound of your voice to be when it's time to get off the TV. I'd rather have that be a set time so that you have a clear expectation. That's number one. Then you can say, here's the first step. I've noticed you've been having difficulty getting off the TV at 6 p.m. to come in for dinner. What's up? And now you're all ears. That's how the first step, it's called the empathy step, starts, right? I don't know what your kid is going to say. I know what I've heard from thousands of kids who had that unsolved problem, right? I also know that once that problem is solved, y'all aren't going to be getting in a tussle over it anymore because solved problems don't cause concerning behavior. Only unsolved problems do. The fact that y'all are still tussling about that says, once again, that whatever you've done so far, and it sounds like you've done some work on it, we got to give him some warnings. What your son is telling you is that solution isn't working because somebody very important was missing. Me, the kid, right? Your warning is not working for me. Apparently, it's not addressing what's getting in your kid's way. Let me give you an example. Let's say, and I hear this frequently, I don't want to lose my level in the game I'm playing.
Yep.
A 5-minute warning is not going to address your kid's concern, right? Which is why the 5-minute warning isn't working. There's other kids. This is going to sound interesting for those of us who have a good sense of time. There are kids who don't have a very good sense. There's adults too, who don't have a very good sense of time, right? You say 5 minutes, Greek to them, right? They do not know what 5 minutes feels like. And 5 minutes is a feeling, right? You have a sense of time passing, right? So 5 minutes may mean nothing to your son, in which case that's another reason the solution might not be working. But we got to hear from you. I'm guessing right now, right? We don't want you to guess. We don't want me to guess. Let's find out from your son what's hard about getting off the TV at 6 p.m. to come in for dinner. Then the second step, your concern. Why is it important that your kid get off the TV and come in for dinner? Hopefully you have a good reason, right? Often, I'm not telling you what your concern is, but what I typically hear is, well, this is the time that we're together as a family. You're an important member of our family. This is when we talk about our day. And we really think that's an important part of being a family. Third step is called the invitation. This is where you and your son are putting your heads together, collaborating on a solution. But the solution has to address the concerns of both parties. Here's what that might sound like. I wonder if there's a way for us to make sure that you don't lose your level. That was your kid's concern. And also make sure that you're able to hang out with us at dinner, because that's really the only time we're together as a family. And that's really important to us. And then, believe it or not, you're giving your kid the first crack at the solution by saying, you got any ideas? Generally speaking, they do have ideas. Often those ideas do address the concerns of both parties. If they don't, we're still talking about it, right? But if you're asking me, is there a solution to that? Is there a way for your kid not to lose their level and also come be a member at dinner, right? No question about it. That's a solvable problem. The upset that your kid gets when you force the issue because we don't have a solution to that problem yet, you could be doing that for the next 10 years.
Sure. To be honest with you, I haven't personally thought of it that way. We are a family that we use a timer. We use a timer, and to your point, they don't care about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. They care about the actual activity that they're doing and being able to relate with them and use the level that their game that they're playing to bridge that a little bit makes total sense. I would be curious, and I will, we will kind of switch a little bit to the sports aspect here in a second, but I would be curious before I do that. One of the behavior exercises that we completed with our neurodivergent son was PCIT. And I would be and so parent-child intervention therapy, I would be very curious to get your thoughts on the discipline aspect with that, because, if there's, we're doing the exercise and there's an ask given by the parent, and then the child does not follow through, they are then basically told to, whether it be sit on a seat for an X amount of time until they can continue the activity in which we were doing. And if they don't do that, then it kind of escalates and it goes to, okay, now we're going to go to a safe room or a quiet room. And if that even escalates, it could get to the point where now parent has to literally close or hold doors shut, things like that. I have personally, we had very mixed feelings on that and very mixed results. But I would be curious, and I'm sure others would, maybe for parents who are going through that with their children, what your thoughts would be on that.
Parent-child interaction therapy is similar to the way I was trained. I have come to view that as purely about power.
Mm-hmm.
You are using your power to incentivize your kid to do what you want them to do. And you are using your power to let them know that if they don't, it's going to get ugly. You are also letting them know that you are willing to tolerate ugly in the service of winning. Ouch. What's setting in motion that whole sequence, this is critical, is still an expectation your child is having difficulty meeting. Power is a lousy problem-solving strategy. You still don't know what's getting in your kid's way. So here's what it would sound like on the TV issue, right? If you do not turn off that TV right now, and maybe this sounds like it was right out of your household, I'm going to turn the TV off, and if you pitch a fit over it, you're going to time out. Power, pure and simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what's getting in your kid's way. You are just using your power to impose your will. All right. You have power at a certain age, but let's think about what you're training. Kid, I am not interested in hearing what you have to say. I am not interested in knowing what's getting in your way. This is my way or the highway. True story. I've worked with thousands of families. One of them, by the time they got to me, the kid was 16. And the parents and the kid were in my office, and the kid was seething. And he looked at his parents and he said, I used to have to do what you say because you were bigger than me. Now I'm bigger than you. You do what I say. The parents looked at me like, see? And I said, I see two people who better start solving problems with their son because y'all are like 13 years too late, right? You've been relying on power all this time. Look at the torture you've been putting everybody through. Holding your kid in timeout for an expectation they're having difficulty meeting? I got a better idea. Solve the problem that's causing the issue in the first place. Skip the timeout. Skip the power. Collaborate with your kid. Y'all are partners, not adversaries.
Very, very interesting. Now, when we talk about kids that may struggle in a school environment or a certain kind of environment, but then they get to an athletic field, why is it that some of the qualities that they have trouble with or get disciplined for in a school environment are now viewed as positives? But at the same time, when I ask that question on the playing field, or we still need players to be able to respect their coaches and coaches to then discipline the players. So how do coaches keep the expectations the same for all of their players, whether they are neurodivergent or they're neurotypical? Because the odds are they're going to have a neurodivergent or multiple neurodivergent athletes on their team. So,
I don't think their expectations are the same for every player. That's number one.
and should they be?
They should not be.
Okay.
Not in terms of performance. Some kids are more athletically talented than others. Why would we have the same expectation there, right? As it relates to what we often call respect, disrespect is a form of concerning behavior. When do kids show disrespect? When they're having difficulty meeting a particular expectation. So if you expect a kid to deliver the goods on something they are not yet able to deliver the goods on, whether that's hockey or whatever the sport, whatever the academic task, coaches are not exempted from the problem-solving process. Another true story. My son was a hockey player. At the age of 7, after a game, he got into the car after the game, and he said to me, Daddy, what does pathetic mean? I said, where'd you hear that word? He said, Coach told me that I was pathetic on that play in the corner. All right. So I don't know what that accomplishes. I don't know if that's humiliation. That's actually disrespecting a kid,
Hmm.
right? If my son is having difficulty with whatever skill the coach thought he should have performed in the corner, coach him up. Coaching is not the same as disciplining. High expectation, this is true in academics too. High expectations are great as long as every kid is their own reference point. High expectations are easy so long as every kid is their own reference point. But if we're expecting everybody to be Tom Brady, almost everybody's going to fall short.
Sure. Um, I look at it like this as well. I think often coaches, they don't always see the positives that, for example, let's use an ADHD kid here as an example. Okay. There are so many amazing positive qualities that those athletes have when they are playing their sport. Yes, their eyes may wander. They may come across as they're not paying attention at times. They may have struggle with impulse control. They may make mistakes because of it. But there's so many coaches out there that would look at all of those as opportunities to reprimand or discipline a kid versus, hey, here's all the things you do well that maybe a neurotypical kid doesn't. Do you have like your son, right? Does you have experience kind of, and I'm not saying your son, I'm saying growing up watching you sports, have you seen that and been able to observe and say, hey, in this situation, I wish this coach would do this, or I wish that coach would have done that.
Totally.
Yeah.
I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. One of the kids on my son's hockey team was supposed to be playing defense, and he was pushing the blue line too close when they were on offense, and he was getting beat. People were getting behind him every time, right? He'd come off the ice, he'd get screamed at, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, Coach, something's not getting through to this kid. No matter how much screaming you do, I've seen you scream at this kid every game, multiple times every game, right? Is that the only tool in your toolbox, right? Why don't we sit down with the kid and figure out why he's pinching so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't get beat. Let's find out from the kid what they're struggling with. Whatever it is, screaming isn't going to solve it. So coaches are prone to the same mistakes lots of other adults make, right? Educators can make the same mistake. They think that the hammer is the only tool in their toolbox, right? The hammer is not even close to being the best tool in your toolbox. I don't even think it should be in the toolbox, right? If kids are struggling, whether on the athletic field or in the classroom, something's getting in their way. That's important information. Now let's do something with that information. And whatever we find out is something a hammer isn't going to fix.
Yeah. And, I feel like, there's so many coaches out there, whether it be youth sports, high school, they want to win, right? They want to win, which is like, in my opinion, we're not focused on the development of these kids and teaching them social skills and life skills and understanding, just being able to get to know what drives them, what they need from us as coaches. And it's almost a shame that approach is not as prevalent as it should be. But like in the scenario you're mentioning right there, I mean, from what I'm hearing, right, it makes more sense to have maybe not the calm, cool, collected coach, but the coach that's able to have some situational awareness and take that step back and say, hey, this kid's struggling with this. Let me understand what's going on, what he's thinking, he or she is, struggling with, and really understanding what the core, what is making, why they are making that mistake.
Correct.
And slowing down the environment for them. I think when everything kind of speeds up and we're, like I said, everybody's worried about winning and all that, but when it slows down, that's the opportunity to engage with an athlete to better understand and help them develop. I don't know if that exists enough at the youth level.
I agree with you completely. And that's the opportune time to do it is not in the heat of the moment, right?
Right.
This kid's been pinching the blue line forever. That's what practice is for, right? Let's find out from the kid. Do you know where I want you to stand on the blue line? Do you know the signals that tell you that a play could be coming towards you and that it's time to start backing up, right? Let me find out what's making it hard for the kid, and then we can do something about it. Screaming's not going to tell us what's hard for the kid, and screaming's not going to fix it for the kid. Every coach, just like every educator, just like every parent, wants to get the best out of their kid. But the best for their kid, whether neurodivergent or neurotypical, has to mean the kid is their own reference point. That's what getting the best out of each kid means, meeting every kid where they're at. What's our estimation of what this kid can do? Let's meet them where they're at and take them from there. We're not putting a cap on what they can do, but we're meeting them where they're at now and fostering growth. And by the way, you know this as well as I do. This goes back to Tom Brady. Some kids aren't going to be a stellar athlete, but they are still getting something incredible out of being on a team, right? There's being a leader, even if you're not the best athlete on the team. There's being a good teammate. There's all kinds of things that come from being on a team that are not necessarily related to athletic proficiency. Having talked to a lot of kids who are athletes, a lot of them feel like the coaches are more hell-bent on winning than they are.
Right.
The kids feel like what they want to do is put forth their best effort. And if they do, things will fall out the way they do, right? We need to be modeling that for kids.
Yep.
Best effort, good teammate, good sportsmanship. There's a lot more to sports than the final score. There are some coaches who lose sight of that.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more with that. It's the coaches that are able to find the small wins throughout the course of a practice in a game versus the end result. That's something that we need to look for every single day when kids are out there. And I would be curious as well with this, because I know you had a podcast episode on Lives in the Balance podcast on perseverance and grit. And I'm curious on that because that's something that we are working with every day with our sons, neurodivergent and neurotypical. But the ability to overcome adversity, the ability to keep moving forward when things are hard. It's obviously in athletics that's magnified, but just in life in general, and kind of bringing all of that together. Any tips or tricks that you have on how to help parents and coaches develop that aspect from their kids and from the athletes?
Well, as you heard on that podcast, the grit folks feel that there are two ingredients that are central toward fostering grit: perseverance and passion. Perseverance for a lot of adults means just keep plugging away until you're successful, right? But as I said in that podcast, there's a P word missing: problem solving. What's getting in my way? What can I do about it? How is it working? That's problem solving. I fervently believe that if we are helping kids problem solve their way through their challenges, grit is being developed, perseverance is being developed. I think the key is problem solving. Now, I'm biased, but I've seen too many kids who adults just kept saying, stick with it, try harder, you can do this, when it wasn't true. I was struck about 3 months ago. Mike Vrabel, the coach of the New England Patriots, the American Football Conference champion.
Champion Patriots. Hey, I'm an Eagles fan, so we have some history.
He said that the key to good coaching was meeting every player where they're at. All right. Words of wisdom as far as I'm concerned. That's a coach.
Yep. Great quote. I guess I would ask here, really, if you could, to kind of give our parents and listeners an idea of what the most important skills that they can focus on in developing, because they need to take it one thing at a time, right? So what would be the most important skill that parents could take away when they listen to this and say, okay, I'm gonna work on that first with my child?
Problem solving.
It's
my number one. If you asked me, what's the main task presented to our brains when we're faced with a problem or frustration? And life is going to be full of those. Problem solving, solving problems collaboratively, meaning solving problems in a way that coming up with solutions in a way that doesn't just work for you, but that work for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That's a skill that's going to come in handy in marriage. It's a skill that's going to come in handy in the workplace. That's the real world skill. Problem solving. Here's the good news. If you're solving a lot of problems with your kid and you're doing it collaboratively and proactively, you're not only getting a lot of problems solved, you are enhancing that skill. It's number one.
Yep. Makes sense. When a child is, or an athlete is trying to, let's just say, solve the problem themselves because maybe the parents aren't around. So they're in an environment where they're trying to get through this and work through it themselves. And it's a moment, it's an opportunity to persevere, but in their mind, maybe they're not because they're struggling or they're failing, right? Or they're dropping passes being thrown to them from their coach one after another, and they're just getting more and more emotional, more and more frustrated. And that is then met with tears and anger and frustration and shutdown. I want to close with when that scenario happens, because that happens to all of us, right? That happens to, as when we see it happen to our children, we want to be able to best help them through it, or our coaches that are coaching our kids give them the tools to be able to best help them through it. What would be the key things in that scenario that you could give to listeners?
Well, number one, I hope that the individual has had a lot of practice at problem solving. I hope that their practice hasn't been just having somebody else tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're dependent on somebody else to tell them what to do. If they're having trouble problem solving their way through something, that could be the reason. But it still comes down to problem solving. One of the running backs for the Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson, blew a game in game 3. He blew it because he was fumbling so much, right? And he was fumbling in the first 2 games too. And the coach of the Patriots, Mike Vrabel, everybody was calling for Ramondre Stevenson to be benched. Bill Belichick probably would have gotten rid of him or benched him for the fumbles. Mike Vrabel said, this is our running back. We need him. And I don't think Ramondre Stevenson fumbled for the rest of the year. Apparently, Ramondre Stevenson was having trouble solving that on his own. Apparently, his coaches helped him solve it. I can't imagine that it was by screaming at him. I can't imagine that it was by punishing him, that he would have just got to been benched, right? No, apparently there was something he was doing related to how he was holding the ball or whatever that left him prone to fumbles, that they helped him problem solve his way through.
Mm-hmm.
That's the help he needed. Apparently, he wasn't able to problem solve through it himself. It was clear to me by him throwing his helmet and being very upset after games. Ramondre Stevenson really wanted to not fumble, but something was getting in his way. It looks to me like the coach has figured out what that was, because he's been extremely successful for the rest of the year.
Yep. They gave him the opportunity and the confidence to overcome that failure by just having probably calm conversations with him behind closed doors. Say, hey, what's going on? What are you seeing?
Right.
Watching film together with him, not in a abrasive way to put him down. I mean, sure, they're professionals, right? So it's pretty black and white, but at the same time, they're doing it in a way that is still making him feel like, hey, I'm not going to lose my job. I'm not going to lose my paycheck. I'm not going to get cut from this team. They still believe in me. And because they believe in me, I'm now given the opportunity to regain my confidence and to,
No question.
ultimately then help the team get to the Super Bowl. Right. So,
you know what professionals in my business are supposed to do when we come across a kid or a patient who we are stumped by? We're supposed to seek out guidance from another clinician, because clearly we're having trouble thinking our way through it. Maybe a different set of eyes can help us get through it.
mm-hmm.
That's what all of us need when
Mm-hmm.
we're faced with a problem that we can't solve, right?
Yep.
But it sure does help if we've raised kids to have muscle memory for how to solve problems. I don't think they're going to get stumped very often.
Yep. And truly getting to know all that's going on. For example, the athlete may have something going on in their personal life, right? And their focus isn't where it needs to be on a daily basis, right? But the coach having the ability to form that connection and that bond with that player goes a long way. And my opinion is the coaches of probably today's time do a better job of that with, today's athletes and generation versus, maybe the coaches from 10, 15 years ago that are, now maybe coaching at the University of North Carolina. But that's just my opinion.
Well, very tired.
Yeah. But
I
no,
can think of a few more.
what's that?
I can think of a few more.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But no, I genuinely appreciate this conversation and all of your insight. It has been super, super helpful. You've given me personally something to think about because you've opened my mind to just ways of thinking that I have not even that haven't crossed my mind in the 2.5 years and that we've been going through behavioral therapy with our son and changing schools a couple of different times and trying to figure out what athletic environments work for him, what extracurricular activities that he should get involved in. But at the end of the day, you also simplify it as well. And I genuinely appreciate that. And I hope that our listeners feel the same way and have a tangible takeaway that they can work on with their children or their athletes.
I hope so too.
Thank you so much, Dr. Greene.